It's the PokerNews Podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 832nd episode of the PokerNews Podcast, a little special edition here at Level 9 Studio in Las Vegas. I am Chad Holloway, joined by Daniel Negreanu and David ODB Baker. We're here to talk fantasy poker, gentlemen. I'm excited about it. 25K, the big 500 that I go into every year because I'm not affording 25K. But yeah, we're only days away from the World Series of Poker. And you guys excited?
Yeah, go first, Daniel.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm just, a lot of people are reaching out and, kind of scramble teams together and stuff like that and just get our ducks in a row. Typically, this is the time of doing a lot of research. I had my wife's brother in town. I haven't done any. So I'm going to hopefully get the exact same team I got last year.
Yeah. And the 500, that got a lot of entries last year. Thinking the same thing this year?
Yeah. So, I'm sure we'll recap exactly what I do with that. But I think fantasy poker has really been a huge positive for the World Series and everybody that attends. And on top of it, I think it's a big positive for PokerNews. Drive traffic to PokerNews. You check on your teams and check on the players and see where they are. So, I'm sure we'll get into where it came from and everything. But, for those who don't know, I host a $500 open to the public fantasy poker style, DFS style World Series fantasy contest. And we'll get into a little bit of that later, but excited for the World Series. It's crazy that it's here. I kind of just feels like it jumped up on us. But yeah, a couple more days. Let's get it rolling.
Yeah, I was just there. They were doing some setup. Let's talk about the 25K when it originated back in 2011. You actually didn't start it, which is something I just recently learned. Is that correct?
Well, the first year, actually, it was a gentleman by the name of Howard Lederer who had everyone come to his house. And so, just so people understand sort of the scoring system and how it all developed the way that it did. This is at a time in poker and there's a whole bunch of no limit and all this new stuff and a lot of people we didn't know. But there was a mixed game crew, right? So the whole structure of the points and everything was really designed for mixed game guys because they knew the players. So it was a smaller group rather than drafting the no limit. Actually, back then, drafting a no limit guy was just a big mistake. We've adapted it a little bit, but the core of it was really sort of final table heavy, mixed game heavy. And now we've now you can draft teams different ways because we have the crazy bonuses and different things like that.
So 2011, obviously Black Friday happens. Howard Lederer is out and you come in and decide to take over?
Yeah, I love fantasy stuff. I've been a fantasy nerd ever since I was a little kid. I'm like, well, I want to keep this thing going. And so, I was able to put it together. And ever since, I've always felt like 12 teams was nuts. That's a lot, $25,000. And then last year we got 20. I don't see us getting 20 again this year, but I would guess between 17 to 19. Something like that.
I'm looking over some of the numbers from the yearly draft. So the first year in 2011 looks like 15, long way from Howard Lederer's living room to the Poker Go studio now, because it's become a spectacle, right? People want to tune in. We were talking off the air that you have people reaching out to you all the time saying, draft me, even though there's no incentive for them.
That's the craziest thing. It's like a pride thing, right? Poker's an individual game. It's not a team game, right? And often there's so many people out there, they just there's a sense of pride about being chosen, right? They want to be a draft pick. And the funny thing is they have absolutely no incentive. There's nothing about it that gives them anything. It's not like you get drafted and you get a contract. There's no entry level contract, for something like that. And what you also see too, and David alluded to this, is it's good for the numbers overall at the World Series because you get a whole bunch of people when they're on a team or they're like, all right, let's go. And they play more events. I can't imagine if you put into numbers how much extra revenue has been created just from the 25K alone.
Right.
So, Daniel has, since the start of the 25K, he's been a big deal in poker, and he doesn't really quite understand this from an up-and-coming standpoint. I used to drive every year from Houston, Texas, where I lived, with my buddy Ray Hansen, and we would drive to Vegas 24 hours, and we would listen to the simulcast of the draft, and we would just wait and hope that we would get drafted. And then you see where you go and it's like, oh, that person respects me because they bid on me and they bid more. I remember Daniel had me one of the first years or, as I was coming up and I had played with him and then he drafted me and I'm like, okay, good. The king of poker, respects.
Right. I don't think I cashed that year, did I?
Yeah, probably not. but just in general, it's kind of just a pat on the back from your peers. So I went from that to, I would drive and I would listen to it. And then, I never had the money to be able to do a 25K team, nor the friends to be able to pool money together to be a 25K team. So I'm driving and looking at this thing. And one year, I'm like, oh my God, these guys are so bad at drafting. Like I could really put together a better team. And that's how my thing came about. I tweeted just for fun, hey, anybody want to take the prices that were drafted and play my team versus your team, and I'll just use the prices that they picked, because I thought some guys went way overpriced, some guys went way underpriced. I thought I could build a better team than them. So I expected to have 2 or 3 people text me and get a little friendly wagers. Next thing I know, everybody's texting me. The first year, when I sent that text out, we ended up with almost 100 people in my league. I wasn't ever supposed to be a league. Right. It was supposed to be me as a way to gamble on this, and everybody loved it. And my wife and I, everybody who's done my fantasy league knows she's the engine behind it. I couldn't even do it without her. But she arranged and she built a spreadsheet with 94 teams, and she calculated it manually and all that stuff. And then the next year just kind of built. And a couple years later, Stan, who runs the website.
Shout out 25kfantasy.com.
He is the best. Honestly, if my wife decided not to do it, we may be able to piece it together. If Stan decided not to do it, I'm done. I mean, Stan is the absolute stone cold nuts with the website. And he approached me and he said, hey, I can build a platform along with what Daniel does and build a platform for you. And as the years went on, it started to get better and better. Now I think it's just elite. You can draft your teams DFS style. So anyway, for those who don't know, you put $500 up, you have the $200 budget that Daniel has in his draft, and you just build the best team you can for $200. And then the entry fee is $500. I wanted to get a few more people involved, so I added a bonus player. Mm-hmm. So you can draft a bonus player, a 9th player, and those are people who weren't drafted. Right. So I try to do that. I'm not necessarily looking for the best players that didn't get drafted. What I'm looking for is I want a chance to bring in more women. I've got like 10 women on the bonus list this year, 10 to 12. I've got some no limit guys who only play, 1500s and below, or 1500s to 3000, and a couple of high rollers who might only play like 10 events, but their schedule's not worthy of being drafted in 25K. So you can kind of use your own strategy. What do I think's better? The mixed game guy who maybe he's just not good enough to get on the 25K team, or just a low limit person or whatever. And that's kind of how I do it. I think we had almost 600 people last year, and I expect similar this year.
594, 297,000 prize pool, 50K top prize.
And I want to say to his credit too, like, I don't think people realize like how much of a hassle that is. Because he gives a little bit of a window, but can't have a long window. Because if you leave a long window, what happens is people start to take advantage. Right. They look at the chip counts and go, oh, look at this guy's chip leader. I'm going to take him, or whatever the case may be. Then he has to collect like $500 chunks from that many people. Right. That's probably not an easy process.
Yeah. I mean, the first couple days at the series, I'm doing myself a disservice actually, because I collect like during the first couple events. Because that's when everybody's together. I mean, I don't want to go all over town and nobody wants to come and meet me. So we're all in the same place. They just come over and, I
never pay on time. Yeah. I've never been on time. I'm like, I'm good for it. I swear.
Yeah. And why don't you jerk some money right now? Let's just get this over with. I got like
500. I always buy 4 teams. I don't think I have enough.
All right. Well, we'll figure it out.
It's interesting because what we've learned, especially from last year, was this 25K and then yours as well. So 594 people, 20 teams in yours. People want to know how these players are doing, especially as the series progresses, because there's so many implications and points. And with PokerNews being the official live reporters, oftentimes we weren't living up to the standard that I think people wanted in that regard, which is going to change this year. Hence kind of why we're doing this show, why I connected with you both during the off season. And I can say that a couple things are going to be different with PokerNews, especially for those who want to follow the fantasy implications. And that is now an ability to sort the live updates by hand and by chip count for just 25K players. So you can go to the chip counts, click a button and it will just show you the 25K players, whoever they might be, whoever's drafted. Likewise for the hands, you can click a button, filter, and just see those hands. So the hope is that this will really, take it to another level in terms of sweating, especially the side events that might not be being streamed on Poker Go and things like that. And I get the honor, and I love fantasy poker. I used to play in an ESPN league with Howard Lederer and others way back in the day for no money, but fantasy poker has always been in my blood. And it never really did catch on until, you always had the league since 2011, but it caught on with the everyman when it was that 500 affordable price point. So,
and you bring up a good point. I wanted to add a caveat just so that people know for the rules this year. Everyone kind of, when I came up with it, everyone was like, yes, do that. The online events would cause a major hitch in the standings because like an online event happens on a Tuesday, we don't get the result till Friday. So you wake up and you don't know who won. It's very difficult to follow, as you know. Like then when you wake up Friday, you were in 4th and all of a sudden you're in 7th. You're like, what, who, where, what,
Right.
So now that we don't count the onlines, Stan does such a great job of updating almost in real time. So the standings are constantly updated and that makes it more fun when you can actually have a sweat each day and actually know really where you stand.
Yeah, I think the thing that needs to be remembered is the whole purpose of the fantasy thing is to have fun. And somebody says, "Oh, that's not fair. Like for this player, they're good at online, or this player's not." Nothing's fair. Everything's fair if everybody plays by the same rules. We're all going into the draft knowing the same things, the same events that count, the same scoring system. So everything's fair. But having online on, Daniel reached out to me when he first thought of this. Having online on makes it less fun. So the whole idea is we want to do everything we can to have more fun. A couple years ago, seniors, women's event were not included. Why not?
Yeah.
To be honest, like it just gives the women just a little bit more value. So somebody you're on the fence with, maybe, between a guy and a girl for a pick, maybe you decide to take the woman. Maybe you decide to take an old guy like me who's going to be in the seniors. And now there's
that's why he added the seniors.
Now there's a high roller seniors. Yeah. I had to work my own angle in there. So we're just trying to make it as fun as possible.
I'd say
for
one
everybody.
of the things that people have come out with for the last 10 years, and I really push back against this because the part of it is not just the fun, but also you want everybody to have a chance, right? You don't want just the Sharpies to have like, oh, they know how to draft better, they just win. You need to add some variance. One of the ways we do that is each result is not equitable, okay? Coming 72nd in the, Colossus or something is not the same as winning a 10K stud.
Right.
That's a far more impressive accomplishment, but you get the same points, okay? And a lot of people like really don't like that and they don't get it. But what it does is it allows for different strategies. Like maybe Baker's more tuned into the mixed game community. Well, what about someone like Martin Zamani last year who came in and he knows the no limit guys, whatever. So he's going to take some shots. If he gets lucky and a bunch of his guys hit that crazy big bonus, he has a chance to be in there too. So I think it really, it's important to like look at it for what he says. It's not like player of the year. We're not basing it based on, how impressive the accomplishments were. It's just about making it fun, making everybody draftable. Because again, that was the biggest thing I noticed, like in the first few years. If you drafted a guy who only plays no limit, you're just hunting. It's just terrible. Now, those guys hit those 100-point bonuses. Looking good.
Let's talk about the history of the league a little bit. There has been like 20 players last year was huge. Like that, were you anticipating that it would get that big?
No, like I said, I thought 16 would be the most we ever get, but last year, and the funny thing was last year, normally each year I want to make sure that it's good, like get at least 10 teams.
Right.
So I reach out to everybody. Hey, you've done it before. You want to do it again? Last year, I didn't reach out. Everyone's coming at me saying we want in. So that makes it a lot easier for me too. I'm
looking over the results. So that very first year, Jason Somerville and Jason Mercier teamed up and they won. Jason Mercier then won by himself in 2012, the only two-time winner of the 25K league, which I think is interesting. Matt Waxman.
He hit and run too.
Yeah.
He doesn't even do it anymore.
Team Gypsy. Who was Team Gypsy?
Team Gypsy is the Russian team. The Gypsy Poker.
Right. They won in 2014. George Danzer was on their team. Of course, the player of the year there. Team Hastings, Brian Hastings. Team Daniel Alai. Team Mike Lea. Team Fleischman, Team Ryan Reese. Team Maria Ho was an interesting one. You finished runner-up that year, right?
Yeah, we were leading. We were cruising the whole way, and then she came in with a light push.
And Corey Aldemir was on her team, and he kind of came out of nowhere.
Steal. And that's what's going to happen, too, a lot of the times. Like, a guy who hasn't been playing much, he's going to play. That's a little bit of added information. One of the changes I made to the league, too, though, was it really felt bad when Chris Vitch let everyone know he wasn't playing. One guy didn't know, and he picked him, and he got stuck with him, and he was not going to play that year. So this year, what I try to do is if we all know that somebody's like not playing, we make them undraftable. And there's a couple other names we put on the undraftable list for very different reasons.
Right.
Because you don't want to put people in moral places where like, I'm going to draft somebody who's maybe morally bankrupt. Obviously, you have to be careful with that. Slippery slope,
Sure.
right? You can't just be like people you don't like. You know what I mean?
Can you think of somebody that both of us might not like that we haven't excluded?
No, can't imagine.
No, can't imagine who that could be.
Last year's winner was particularly interesting for me because it was my old boss, Donnie Peters, teamed up with Matthew
So
Clark.
lucky.
Yeah, to like a
So
team
lucky.
media thing there.
Yeah.
And they sold action, I believe, on poker, on Stake Kings,
yeah.
Poker Stake.
I remember the first years we had a team media. I thought that was really important because I wanted to get the media involved. I wanted to grow, right? So I remember the first couple times I took a piece of their teams just to get them in, right? So I was like, whatever, you draft, I'll take half kind of thing. And now, people, obviously they do their research. You guys are, I'm surprised PokerNews doesn't have a team, by the way.
I should, they should throw up that money. I'd be happy to go in there. Like I do my due diligence, I know, I've studied fantasy poker, but like ODB, like 25K doesn't come easy.
I think that's the great thing now also in the poker world is everybody's kind of got used to buying pieces. I don't know if that was as prevalent or as out there in the open, 5-10 years ago. I mean, maybe it was in like small circles, but just that every person now can kind of find ways into tournaments and also find ways to raise 25K.
Right.
Not necessarily as an individual, but maybe if you and your 3 friends each put up 5K and then you find a way to sell the other 10K or something. Also, what you can do is if, you can sell pieces to members of your team and things like that. So there's a lot of ways that you can
last year to incentivize.
Yeah. And me too. I think that's just a smart, way to approach it. But there's a lot more ways to raise the money to get in other than just being, I have 25,000, I'm going to draft a team. So
I got one funny story from way back when in the early days. Because, back then, I didn't call people, whatever. And I knew this kid was real good, Smokey, Steve Bilirakis. So he's good. So I was like, I'll pick $1. Nobody said $2. So what? Why didn't anybody? This guy's a good player. Why didn't he bid him? He's like, oh, he's not playing, not doing so hot. I was like, well, he is now. So it was a nice break for him, but obviously that's not, a lot of people like sort of frown upon that and thought that was like, but whatever. It's again, like you said, it's all in good fun. I'm giving this guy an opportunity. Like, who's mad at that? You know what I mean?
There was a clip.
To one more. Todd Brunson used to say, because he would always draft a team, and Todd would bid on himself, and he'd say 1. He says, anybody bids 2, I'm not playing a single freaking tournament.
I bought Todd a few years ago, and it was like 20. He'd been going for like 40, 50, 60. I bought him for 20. I'm like, yeah, I got it. He's like, I'm not playing.
Yeah.
And he literally played like maybe 6 events or something. I'm like, oh, thanks, buddy.
Thanks. Yeah.
I have a quick video I'm going to show. It was actually Maria Ho after she won. She returned last year, did a little video with WSOP.com. I thought it might be fun to embed that here because she had a lot of fun, won 200K. I thought it was great. So we're going to throw that in right now.
Did you know that top poker pros participate in a 25K WSOP fantasy draft every year? We caught up with last year's reigning champ, Maria Ho.
Damn right, we're the champions last year. Every year, Daniel Negreanu runs a 25K buy-in fantasy WSOP draft where you get $200 to start, and it's auction style. You bid on 8 players, and depending on how those 8 players perform and score throughout the summer, you accumulate points that way. This year, we have 20 teams, so top 4 spots are going to pay. Last year, we had Arieh Aldemir, and people didn't know that he played mixed games and that he was planning to fire everything. We just had that little ace up our sleeve.
What teams are dangerous this year that you're a little nervous about?
Team Lady Gaga is crushing. And it's funny because they did pick a lot of no-limit players, and usually the strategy is you want a player that plays all the games. Daniel Negreanu has a really strong team, and apparently they have a few sweats left in the Millionaire Maker, which has a huge field bonus. I still have hope that we are going to be back-to-back champs.
Visit 25kfantasy.com to see which team comes out on top.
All right, so there you have it. Maria Ho killed it that year with Arieh Aldemir. You finished second that year. Your previous best was 4th place, and I believe it was 2018.
I think in 2011 I came 3rd. It was the first year when Howard ran it. I min-cashed.
I do know in 2018 you finished 15th out of 15 teams.
That's not good.
No, not very good at all.
Oopsie.
But you
if you're not first, you're last, right?
Well, you are certainly a high performer, though, in this fantasy league, the 25K, and then therefore in the 500. You have the second most overall points, 1,935, second only to Phil Hellmuth.
He loves that, by the way. Phil does that. He always promotes how he's like the number one. And because I feel he gets a little slighted, because, the top guys go for like Sean Deeb and myself, like over 100. And Phil usually goes for in the 70 range. And he does not like that. You know, he doesn't like that. And you know what? Listen, to his credit, he's put up the numbers. You know, each and every year he finds a way to get it done. So, you know, maybe this, you know, who always gets him is Dan Fleischman. He's big on him and the grinder. It's like, that's the thing. After you do this draft for a while, you start to know, like, all right, that's your little guy. Like, I took Nick Schulman, I think 4 times now. Yeah. You know?
Do you want to guess? Well, so Sean Deeb, who you just mentioned, is third, 1,747 points. You guys want to guess who rounds out the top 5, number 4 and 5 spot?
Oh, is Benny Glaser up there?
He's not.
No, he hasn't been that long enough.
No. There's a different Ben that cracks it.
Ben Lamb?
No.
Ben Tollery? No.
Nope.
No. Ben
Yu.
Ben Yu. That's right.
1,528 points. He's been drafted in 11 of the 12 drafts. You've been drafted every time. Helmuth has been drafted every time. Deeb 11 times. And number 5 has been drafted every year. 1,499 points. Angry John Monet.
Yeah,
makes sense. The mixed game crowd, right from the get-go. Like, probably Sean wasn't drafted the first year because I think he was more considered just like no limit, you know, until now. He's, you know, obviously well-versed in all the games.
Yeah. So that is the top 5. I want to ask you guys about a couple players. I don't know any information. I just kind of came up with some interesting people to talk about. Just get your take. Like, would they be a good person to draft possibly? Do you think they might perform, or maybe just steer away from them? I'm going to start with the reigning World Series of Poker champ, Dan Weinman. Think he'd make a good fantasy guy?
I don't know, because like now he's got too much money. I know he loves the game. He loves to play and all that. But then again, I don't know. I haven't actually reached out because he's not on my list, if you will. But I mean, I would imagine, like, again, you'd have to know what his schedule looks like, right?
Yeah, I don't think he's planning on a big schedule. Here's the thing though, like, he might have a piece of Team Lucky, so he might play a little more if he's chosen on that team. But Dan Weinman's a scratch golfer. He's got a fiance, and he's the, you know, won $12 million last year.
Is he playing all the games?
He plays.
No limit. He plays all the games.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, he won the World Series of Poker, so that's no limit.
Well, I got that part. I'm just thinking about, does he play the mixed game?
Yeah, he has. I think he has a PLO bracelet or a stud bracelet or a second or whatever. Yeah. He cashed the 50K PPC a couple years ago. Dan Weinman's a great guy, but he won't be on my radar. When I draft somebody, I want to know that they're playing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, sometimes I look at a guy and I'm just like, oh, you should pick him. Like, he's going to go for a lot. Like, I don't, you know, that's not, you know, unless I have like a real insight or something like that. But there's a bunch of guys that I just have on my don't draft list because I already know they're not going to be underpriced.
And you know what's kind of scary is you think a guy's going to play, and so you just bid him up, and then they stop. Last year, my namesake, Bakes, he was 2, and I just said 3, and then everybody stopped. And this guy's gone for like $30, $40 before he can play all the games. He's got 3 bracelets, and they stopped. And nobody said anything. It's going once, going twice, sold. And I have David Baker for $3. Yeah. And I was petrified for about 30 minutes till one of the guys in my group could reach out to me. He's like, oh yeah, I'm playing. I'm like, oh my God.
Beautiful. God. I used to bluff probably too much. Right. Like, when someone's there and they're bidding on themselves, you assume that they're going to play. Like, so Dan Shack did the draft a couple of years ago, and he bid 4 on himself. I'm like, I mean, I'll go 5. He's going to go to 10, 15, you know, let's get the bidding going. And Dan looks at me and goes, done. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go Dan now, right? So that year, Dan didn't do anything. And then last year, I don't have Dan Shack, and he crushes. He hits a field bonus and scores like 200 points.
Well, it's a weird dynamic because, you know, poker has a lot of egos, and there's a lot of egos in that room. And a lot of guys, they want themselves. So they're willing to overbid for themselves. They have control of their destiny to some degree. And also because they know they can play a little, you know, they can play a higher schedule and stuff. But then there's other guys like Daniel, for instance. I don't think Daniel ever buys himself, or at least he hasn't.
One time.
I think once.
It's been a while, because the reality is, if Daniel has a good year, then he doesn't need to have the fantasy.
I will say this though: last year we had it was the most fun I've ever had in the draft, because we had a chat group, and I'm buddies with all these guys. We golf. It was like Nick Schulman, Ben Lamb, Josh Arieh, Eric Wasserson, myself. Like, we're all buddies, and we're all, you know, like Bucky, Matthew Weinman, right? I'm like, we're all strategizing, but like, I'm not on the team. So like, when one of the guys in the team did well, we're like, yeah, go. And then I'm like, I do well. I was like, we don't care. We don't get a piece of that. Who cares?
Another guy I want to ask about, somebody you're very familiar with, both of you, Josh Arieh. Good bet.
He just got married, man. I don't know.
He sucks. I would definitely not.
I had him last year. I had Josh obviously on the team last year. With him, though, you know, with Josh, sometimes what he does is he hits a wall And then he's like, I'm going home. I'm like, what do you mean you're going home? There's 2 weeks left. So with him, he's got to really want to play.
Josh is all in poker now. I think he's going to.
No, I think so too. But, like, I think he's going to.
Yeah, I mean, he's running Poker Steak now, and he's really dove into this Team Lucky. So I'm sure he's going to be there if he, trying to get lucky. But he does, Josh is well off. He's well accomplished. He's got all the accolades.
Well,
so
one
if he
decides,
if he decides for a few weeks, if he does poorly, he could leave.
There's one accolade that he doesn't have that I think matters to him, and I think like last year he was in the running. For the Poker Hall of Fame, you had Brian Rast and you had Josh Arieh, and then what Rast did, I was so proud of Josh for actually going. You know what, he deserves it. Based on, because a lot of it has to do with recency bias. I think, if Josh wins a bracelet or two this year, it's undeniable. Like, how do you keep him out, And again, there's contentious debate about it each and every year, but it's cool to see that he cares about it. And I think he understands how the recency bias works, that if he does win like 2 bracelets this year, that really puts him on the map for, real contention to get inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead. And Josh is good at every game. So, I mean, that's
not what Mike Mateos told me.
Well, Mike Mateos. How many games is Mike Mateos good at? 08?
Mike said he's such a freaking idiot.
Well, you know what? He's very lucky if he's not good. So either way, he's either very lucky or he's very good. I'll take both. But
one of the hottest players in poker right now in the reigning Global Poker Award, Player of the Year, Weng. Would he be a good draft for the WSOP, you think?
That's an interesting one. It's a little bit of a flyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a couple things that I look at with someone like him. There's other events too now. Like the people hated the word that when I use the word leech, but it's essentially, the World Series of Poker happens in the summer. So the other properties see that as an opportunity to run good events. Right. So he's going to play like a lot of different properties. And he's also, predominantly no limit. I don't know that he plays any of the other games, right? So you have to ask yourself if, I think that hurts the value overall. But the fact that he plays high rollers and he plays those big field bonus ones, he's a guy who's proven like he puts up results. So I don't know. If I had to throw out a number, I say maybe it depends on how many teams are in there, but I could see him going for like 15 to 17, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking like 10. I mean, the thing with a player like him is his floor is low. So when you end up paying more money for players, you're paying for the floor and the ceiling. Mm-hmm. Guys who if Weng puts up, a 5-point World Series, it doesn't mean he's bad. Yeah. It just means that he's playing in these big field events. Whereas, Adam Friedman's most likely not going to put up a 5-point World Series because he's playing in 100 field events.
Yeah, you bring a good point. It's like when you draft a stud and you're going to spend $70 on a stud, that stud's going to put up something. When you're drafting the $1 guy, you're like, I don't know, who knows? He could catch lightning in a bottle and be worth a lot. But if he doesn't, like to David's point, it's not the end of the world. If your big studs falter somehow, that spells the end for you.
Right. I think the way a lot of people like to build it is they like to pay money for the floor and then gamble with the big ceiling guys like a Ben. Ben has a big ceiling. I mean, if he could easily field bonus 2 777 Millie Maker monsters, those type of thing. You get 2 bonuses like that. I mean, you just rocket into
he's
the
more
top
than capable
10.
Putting up 200 plus
for sure.
points.
That guy's a good player and he's a grinder.
I mean, you get 200 points
everywhere.
in that league. That's a big score. Like if you're happy with that. Even if you're your top guys, 200 is a lot.
I was going to say, I think I had it here somewhere. Corey Aldemir, when he won for Maria Ho, had like 358 points, and he was the best performing one. So yeah, 200 would be a big number. Let me ask about Kristin Foxen, because we talked a little bit about women, right? A lot of women don't get drafted because you don't see a lot of women playing in the 10Ks. That's not to say it doesn't happen, but that's why you added that kind of bonus field, you said. But sure. Kristin Foxen, I think, did get drafted last year. I could be mistaken, but and she's out there, she's competing. What do you think about her?
She's someone that I look at on my list always because she's going to have a schedule now that she's got her status. She's no longer has to deal with the taxes, so she can play, the high rollers. The only thing is, she also has Alex. I like with her, I'd have to know schedule, but I think with her, she's probably going to predominantly play like 10K plus. And like, if she plays a full schedule, she's guaranteed to get, she has a low floor in that regard in terms of what I think you'll pay for her. So I would think that she's probably, because I think she's also really, really good. Like as far as like, again, I don't know why we didn't do this, but like as far as female players go, I don't think of her that way. I think of her as the only one in the Poker Go studio that, plays at a high level and doesn't have a penis, but it's irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
And her too.
Yeah.
She's a really good player. And I think she's a grinder. I see her everywhere. It's obvious that her and Alex are all in on poker. So I just imagine she'll be down there every day. And the thing about her is she does have, is going to play some of the smaller fields, big buy-in stuff, but I definitely think she'll be in there grinding all the no limit every day.
Only no limit.
Right.
But again, there's a floor. When you're dealing with only no limit players, there is a real floor. I mean, Daniel got last year one of the best high limit, no limit guys was Brian Kim.
Yeah.
And he got like 10 points or something. That doesn't mean that he's bad at poker. He's a great poker player, but no limit just has a lot more variance.
Well, he plays like the high value tournaments, because basically when you get a higher buy and you have an increased chance to make the final table and they're worth double. So he plays the high ones, but there's only if he only plays like 10 of them, he doesn't make a final table, there's nothing there.
I mean, that's the thing. Like Adrian Mateos, he just killed Triton. Right. And I think he's widely regarded as one of, if not the best players around right now. I mean, definitely when you're comprising your list of best players, he's one of them. And he never goes for more than like 20.
I've had him on my team several times because he's also a guy, there's different types of poker players who play the World Series. The high rollers, when they play like the 1500 or whatever, they're not in it. They're playing it, but they're not playing it. Adrian plays it. He plays them hard. Like he loves those main event type fields. Whereas Bryn Kenny we used to laugh about it because Bryn is he's a massive punter in those. And I'm not saying this to diss him. He knows when Bryn's playing in a 250K buy and he brings it. Right. But he's not the guy you want to bet on. We laugh about it because it's just like he doesn't care enough, about the small ones. Adrian has that animal in him where he's a bonus player in the milli maker, and he's also a guy in the 250K who can win.
Jeremy Becker. Guy you have some vested interest in. Would he be a good bet in the 25K?
I think he'll get drafted. I might take him, if it's like $1 or $2.
Right.
But the only issue with that is, so we have the land and Tice bet, of course, right? One of the things about the bet, though, is all properties count, right? And so at the stakes that he plays, he crushes the win. He's the win daily crusher. He's going to play the Venetian. He's going to play all around town. So I think that lowers the value. I think he's still going to play all the bonus stuff. I don't think within the bet also, it's important to note, it's like 10K or below. So there's really no extra incentive to play, for me to take a piece of him in a bigger thing because it doesn't really count for the bet. So I think he's going to get drafted because I think we have so many teams. But I can't imagine going for more than one. I mean, I can't imagine the value being more than 3 or 4.
Sure. I actually think a player like Jeremy Becker is great with that bonus player section that you've added, right? That he, like you said, he might get drafted.
I'll take him for $1. I'll take him. So he's going to get drafted. If he's last one and it's $1, I'm like, yep, got it. If my whole list is exhausted, right? And then there's Jeremy sitting there, I'm like, okay, buddy.
Well, I spent the day today working on bonus player lists and talking with Stan, who just so we can have, our goal is to get the website up and my draft available as soon as Daniel's is over, so people can have the most amount of time to enter. And I told them remove Landon Tice and Jeremy Becker from the bonus player list because I feel 100% they're going to get drafted because the reality is when you get down to those dollar players, those guys have massive ceilings because they're
low risk, but
they're low risk, and everybody you have to have a ceiling player. You have to have a couple ceiling players on your team if you want to win the 25K. Yeah. You're not gonna win it with a bunch of $1,500 stud players. That's just not the type of players that win. You have to be willing to go high and zero out a couple. That's why he got Weinman last year, and you got Kim, like two guys who, their floors are 10, but their ceilings are 300 or 250.
This thing with what David does. I forgot to mention too. We haven't touched on it. Is Mark Gregorich also runs one, and he's been doing it for years too, which is the same format, but he does it for 2,500.
Right.
So this year, for the first time, what out of respect for the 25K, that he doesn't want to run his first because if there are sleepers and stuff like that, they come out of the woodworks, and then it affects the 25K draft. So what we're doing this year is we're going to have ours a little earlier at 5 p.m. when you normally start around 7 or 8, finish around 8 or 9, and then he's going to do his draft right after that for the 2,500, which is a lot of fun, and they get
we get upwards of 20 this year.
Are you doing both?
Yeah, I always do both. I mean, Mark and I are best friends. So I mean, anything he does, I support, and vice versa. So, I mean, this year is kind of weird because normally there's some super high roller on the first day. So Daniel always has his draft the day before. This year it's a 5K freeze out. So guys who have teams, me, Alex Livingston, Jake Schwartz, Josh K, like all these guys that drafted in Mark's league want to play that 5K. So we had to find a spot to have the draft. And like Daniel said, we didn't want to do it before because there's some sharp guys in our thing. And also there's guys who have teams in the 25K. So the last thing I want to do is throw out a sleeper or Alex Livingston throw out his sleeper. You know?
So let's say Rob Mizrachi. I don't know what his schedule is ever, right? Then I see Mark in his draft, he goes for like 60. Well, they know something.
Right.
So now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I had him as 10. Now he's going up to 50, and that can have a major effect.
I always get a kick out of the sleepers because I remember one year, and I don't think this is giving anything away, but one year Yuki Zhu, Rich Zhu.
Yeah,
that
I used to draft him too.
Yeah, nobody really knew who he was. But
I had him a few years ago when he went for $1 and he had this huge year.
Yeah.
He had like 250.
It's
That was my guy.
every time you guys do a draft, I end up learning about a player I'm previously not familiar with. I'm like, wait, who is this guy? I got to research him now, get familiar with him. I love those sleeper kind of picks. So, last player I'm going to ask about, and this one is always interesting because from a media perspective and a fan perspective, we're never sure if he's going to be there, if he's going to put in a full slate, if he's only going to play a couple of events. That's Phil Ivey. You think nobody knows with Phil is the way I feel.
So I've been friends with this guy for many years, and I never know what the hell he's doing anymore. We have these events at the Poker Go studio all the time. He never plays any of them, and it's not because he wouldn't play, but it's like, there's a turn. He's like, oh yeah, when? I'm like, now. Like they're all week. He doesn't even know. But with the Tritons, he's there all the time. He's obviously just had a 4th place in the, I think it was the main for 1.8. The thing with him though is during the World Series, there's also very lucrative cash games that he plays very high. Like they play as big as 5 and 10,000, mixed. So he loves, people don't understand like how much he loves it. He loves to play, but he's also thinking, financially what makes the most sense, and cash games do. So he's a hit or miss kind of guy. Like I don't typically draft him because I don't think I've ever, maybe once or twice I've drafted him because he's a really risky pick because he might just grind the whole schedule, but he might just not play at all.
Right.
So he's like a guy with a really low floor and an obviously insanely high ceiling. So it's a real gamble. And the thing about him is if you get him for less than $5, that's a great gamble. But it's Phil Ivey.
Right.
Phil Ivey, 30, 40, who knows? I don't know.
I just never feel comfortable because if I get him for 5, then guys like Daniel and guys who know him better. I mean, I don't know Phil, I mean, I know him and whatever, but I don't text with him.
That's like it's a poker game within a poker game too. Cause you see like who's bidding on a guy. I'm like, okay, so I know he's good friends with Mark Regers, right? He's bidding on Mark. I'm like, oh, that Mark's a good bet because David likes him. If you bid him, I'm like, well, what do you know?
Right.
But he knows,
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing in the mixed community. I mean, if you hear about, if Daniel watches me and it's like, oh, and he's like, yeah, I've seen that guy play cash. Well, and I'm bidding him up. Well, that guy's now going to play tournaments,
or
because
vice versa.
I'm not going to bid on him.
Or vice versa. If he ain't bidding, I'm like, well, neither am I.
Yeah. Like Ivey's a guy that I would love to have on my team for 80, but I would hate to have on my team for 13.
Right. So if you saw like 2 of Ivey's good friends bidding up to 50, 60, now he might just reverse course and go, well, I'm taking Ivey then.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Makes
again,
sense.
risky pick.
All right. Well, that's interesting. I can't wait to see who gets drafted. I'm going to be there. We're going to do live updates.
You're not going to get drafted because the casino employees event doesn't
count. Should it count? Like that's a question. Should it count?
That one we leave out just because then you'd be a ringer.
Because as Alan Kessler would say, it's a fake bracelet.
Yes, exactly.
How many fake bracelets does he have?
Touche. I'm looking forward to the casino employees event. It is always a fun one, and it's, as you said, not the first one this year. It's that 5K is the first event on the schedule. But I do want to ask a couple general questions about the World Series of Poker this year. Last year we set a record in the main event, 10,043 runners, I believe it was. You guys think it's going to get more than that this year? I know GG Poker is going to be sending a lot of players.
I'm like right around the same number, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 150 more. I think they're going to break 10,000 again. I do. So poker's hot right now, like globally. And the World Series just brings in everybody. It's a bucket list tournament where, like if people put on their calendar, like I mean, even when I was in Toronto and I was playing the small one, these guys have these leagues. They play all year, and the prize is the winner of the league. Plays the World Series of Poker main event.
Yeah,
yeah. I would probably bet under, but only because I felt like they went really, really hard to push last year and got, max. They really wanted to break that 10,000. But it's kind of weird for me because I generally now in the cash game streets. So I'm not seeing as much excitement on my daily thing because I'm not at, a lot of these tournaments and things. So I'm not really sure if where the buzz is. I mean, there's a lot of buzz. It's the World Series and it's just a snowball that's just going down and it just gains momentum, as it goes. But I'm not really sure if it's at peak where it was last year. But I mean, it's not going to drop off by too much. I mean, poker is, like Daniel said, it's still ascending. And even if we fall short, I think that's something to keep in mind. Like, we don't need to look at it as a failure to poker or like that we're on the way down.
Only 9,400 players.
Right.
Like,
I mean, let's just temper expectations and know that not everything has to go up every single year. I mean, even Bitcoin goes down like at some points, And
that plays a role in how many players there's going to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is another thing. If Bitcoin continues to ascend, then that's probably a net positive for, the World Series and poker and all that.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to be there in the studio doing live updates for Poker News. The first time we're going to be doing that as well. So I know it's going to be streamed, but we're also going to have a live record of who's drafting, maybe who's bidding on each other. And then 25kfantasy.com is a good place to keep up with all the updates. And for real-time information, like I said, Poker News is going to be trying our best. I'm going to be there. I'm the 25K guy on PokerNews.com. And hopefully it adds a little new element and a little sweat to this year's World Series of Poker.
Yeah, I just want to say you can follow me on Twitter at AU David B, and I'll be posting everything for the fantasy league that I run, the $500 that we talked about. Just quickly, if you're not in Vegas and you only have electronic, I'll do it for, a few people. But please, if you're in Vegas or you have friends in Vegas, please give cash. You know how a lot of these online things are with money, and I don't really want to get a lot tied up there. But AU David B, I'll be posting on there, and you can enter teams on 25kfantasy.com, or you can go to 25K Fantasy on Twitter and get all that information. And hopefully we'll break 600 this year. But, even if we have 550, it'll still be great. So,
and the team builder software is amazing. Like, you literally have the list of players and their prices. You can sort them. You pick a guy and it shows you what you have left. And you're like, all right, well, I had $6 left, and you can make changes. It's really well done. He does a great job.
And
you can also edit. So if you submit a team on, the morning before, and then, you see somebody that and he's like, yeah, I'm playing a lot, and you can go back and edit your team. Like, it's not once you hit the button,
I
it's
didn't
gone.
even know that.
Yeah, that is nice.
You can edit your team up until lock, which lock is going to be on the start of day 2 from event 1.
Okay. Yeah. And if there's somebody out there who happens to be like, I got 25K, I want to jump into this, try it out, and enter yours.
Yeah, then they reach out to me, or someone who might know me or whatever. Just let me know. Like, I see because the thing is, sometimes people go, yeah, I want in. I'm like, okay, well, you don't have any money. I know that. Or it's 20. You have to actually pay $25,000. So I ended up having a bunch of people in my DMs now that, I follow and they follow me kind of thing, but they think that was their goal. Like, they never had an interest of doing it. So if you're serious, then, reach out to me. And we don't have a cap on it. And I think we don't need one. Because like I said, we had 20, which was nuts. I don't think we'll get 20 again this year. But even if we did, it's never going to be like 30. Right. Which would be kind of crazy.
It doesn't even matter, because the reality is, the way the scoring is now, there are hundreds of people draftable. Yeah. I mean, I have a list of 100 bonus players that we're going to sort out. And that doesn't include, I didn't include anybody in the bonus players that were drafted last year. So there are a lot of players out there. And once you start going deeper into the Jeremy Beckers and the Landon Tices of the world that, our last year's Jeremy Becker and last year's Landon Tice, like, those guys have value now with all the bonuses and things. So we can take as many teams as you want, I think, in your 25K for sure.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you taking the time to join me. I'm getting excited. I'm going to put in a team in the $500 league, maybe one of these days. Maybe if I win that one, I can parlay it next year into the 25K. And we're going to be doing 2 episodes of the Poker News Podcast during the World Series every week. We're going to release on Tuesdays and Fridays. And I'm going to do a segment every single week where I'm going to update the players on the 25K league, in the $500 league, probably do some of Greg Rich's $2,500 league as well. I want a little, just a fantasy poker segment for people to tune in. So every Tuesday and Friday, we'll be releasing those. And until then, we'll keep a seat open for you.